Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for tips and tools for financing your application and career in medicine. This session will discuss how to best prepare for the cost of applying to medical school and provide you with the information and resources to understand what you need to know to pay for medical school. During this session, you will hear from a pre-health advisor as well as an education debt management specialist that will provide you with tips and tools to help you prepare for your financial journey and answer questions about the expenses that you will navigate through applying and attending medical school. My name is Nishika Knight. I am a senior specialist for medical school admissions here at the AAMC, and I'm joined today by two colleagues, Julie Gilbert and Francisco Castellan. Francisco received bachelor's degrees in both psychology and Spanish from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and earned an MS degree in counseling psychology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He brings more than 15 years of experience with health professions advising, including leadership positions in the National Association of Advisors for the Health Profession and the Southeastern Association of Advisors of the Health Profession. Julie Gilbert is a senior education debt management specialist for the AAMC's FIRST, which means Financial Information, Resources, Services, and Tools. She has been with the AAMC for 8 years. In her position at the AAMC, Ms. Gilbert works with the medical school community on issues surrounding education, debt management, and financial education. She strives to promote financial literacy so that students will have a strong foundation to repay their student loan debt and balance their financial responsibilities. Julie provides debt management and loan repayment strategy workshops, manages the communication and marketing strategy for FIRST, and helps to design and edit materials for the FIRST program. Ms. Gilbert holds a BS in education with a minor in sociology from Indiana University of Pennsylvania. And with that, I'll turn things over to Julie.
Thanks, Nishika. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this session. I'm really glad that you're here to talk about this very important topic. The first thing I want to do is really just show you and tell you what the AAMC's mission is, and that is to serve and lead the academic medicine community to improve the health of all. We do that in a number of ways, and one of those ways is by helping and providing resources to students who are looking for ways to pay for medical school. We have a program called the FIRST program, which will help you, and you can go to the program through our website at aamc.org/first. There are a number of resources on this website. The very top of the page will show you resources about what I think many of you are going to be interested in, and that would be the pre-med resources, so thinking about how you will pay for medical school. When you are on the FIRST website, just to give you a little tutorial about what you'll see and how to navigate so that you can find the appropriate resources, I do encourage you to take a look at the financial aid fact sheets that are available. These are short and concise information written in a way that we hope will be understandable, because sometimes the topics and the information regarding financial aid can be a little bit confusing. So I encourage you to check those out. The one here is the financial aid application, which actually talks to you about what you'll need to do to apply for financial aid. The other thing to know about our website is that the FIRST website actually has its own search tool. So that's what the arrow is pointing to right now, and when you click where it says to review the FIRST resources, you're actually going to come to a page that has the search bar at the middle of the page versus the top of the page, which is also there, but that goes to the whole entire AAMC student site. The really great thing about the search tool on the FIRST website is that you can actually search by keywords, and you can also search by audience and category. If I were to do a search for scholarship information, which I'm sure many of you are probably interested in learning what scholarship opportunities are out there, so perhaps you will want to do this. If you put the word scholarship in for your search, it will automatically pull up all of the resources pertaining to scholarship. It'll be in their name or in their subject or have to do with scholarships. So I encourage you to check that out and utilize those resources if they're of interest to you. The other thing to know about is we have articles written, like this one. This is the top 10 questions pre-med should ask medical school financial aid officers. We actually talked to a number of representatives at different schools and said, you know, what's really important that students should know before they get here? This will give you an idea of questions to ask when you're visiting schools. I encourage you always to set up an appointment with the financial aid office at the medical school because you're going to be able to obtain a lot of information particular about that school. Plus, you can also develop a relationship with the people that may end up helping you for the next 4 years of your life. Now, we're going to talk about a number of things during this webinar. Not only are we going to talk about the cost to apply, we're going to talk about how you might be able to save some money as well. We're also going to talk about the different resources and the different products that you can use to pay for your medical school. And then I'm going to give you a brief overview of what you will be looking at as far as repayment goes, and possibly looking into options for loan forgiveness to pay back some of that debt that you will likely incur while you go to medical school. So the very first topic we'll talk about is what is it going to cost to apply? And I think before we go into that actual topic, we need to talk about the fee assistance program here at the Association of American Medical College. This is a great program that can provide a number of benefits to you if you are eligible. It actually provides assistance for those who would be unable to take the MCAT exam or apply to medical school due to financial barriers. So, how do you qualify for this? Well, you do need to meet a number of requirements, which are shown here on the screen. You also want to make sure that you apply early. If you go to the Fee Assistance Program, which is aamc.org/FAP, you are going to find a number of resources about applying, eligibility, and even the application itself. So I would recommend that you make sure that you qualify and read over the eligibility requirements. If you're not sure if you qualify, even after reading over everything, on the website there is a Contact Us section, and you're encouraged to contact anybody that works with the Fee Assistance Program so that they can better answer your questions. What does this program actually cover? Well, there are a number of benefits with the Fee Assistance Program, including reduced MCAT registration and rescheduling fees, free MCAT preparation resources, complimentary access to the medical school admission requirements website, which is going to help you figure out perhaps which schools are going to be the best fit for you based upon their mission or their demographics, and also find out what requirements are needed for each individual school that provides information. You'll also receive a waiver for all AMCAS fees for up to 20 medical school designations, and if needed, you will have support for MCAT accommodations. As I mentioned, you cannot get these benefits retroactively, so it's very important that if you're going to apply and hopefully be approved for the Fee Assistance Program, that you do that early on, because after you've signed up for MCAT, you can't go back and get that money. So because it only takes 5 business days to find out if you're approved, I would highly recommend that you review your timeline and make sure you get that application in prior to wanting to sign up for the MCAT exam. If you do qualify for the Fee Assistance Program, it can save you well over $2,000, so it's definitely worth it. This is the website for the Fee Assistance Program, and as I mentioned, there's a number of things on here, including eligibility, as well as the application where you can apply. We're going to turn it over now to Francisco, who's going to talk to you a little bit about the costs that you may incur when applying to medical school. I think he's going to give you a lot of good information, a lot of ideas and things to think about as you're progressing. So at that, I'm going to just go ahead and let Francisco take it over.
Wonderful. Thank you, Julie, and thank you, Nishika. I'm happy to be here today. I wanted to start off highlighting that there's a great resource, and feel free to take a picture of your screen so you can see the website. This is a crowdsourced document that's been created to allow students to get a sense of the different costs that are part of the application process, and throughout their time looking at seeing how to start saving some of the money to prepare for these costs. As you can see, these are estimated ranges that are posted on this slide. And what I'd like to highlight from this slide is that the places where there are ranges, it typically are areas where students could potentially save money. And so therefore, being proactive, taking time to prepare, and also doing the research in advance can be great ways to be thinking about the cost, but also preparing in advance. Other things that I like to highlight about this is that when you see the big range that potentially the cost could occur, typically that catches people's attention, because if you are proactive about being prepared ahead of time, then you'll be able to save money along the way. What I'd like to highlight is on the AMC.org website, you'll be able to identify all the MCAT information registration site. And as from the previous slide shows, is that there are unique changes in costs with time, and so being prepared ahead of time, knowing the process for registering for your MCAT is one potential way where you can save money. You'll see that the initial Gold Zone deadline for registering is at $320, whereas if you wait till a later time to register for the MCAT, it jumps up to $375. Along the way, you'll also begin to see that through the different timing of registering and changing rescheduling for your test, they do accrue fees for rescheduling, and again, the price also increases with time going through the process. And along with the cancellation process, where you'll see that there is an actual refund for part of the cost if you are able to cancel and register earlier. So those are unique ways that if students are aware that they set deadlines and timelines, they can be very proactive to start saving money from the beginning. What I'd like to then move into is and talk about the application process, because many students aren't aware that there's many costs that come part with the application process. There is a primary application, a secondary application, and the MCAS is the place where students will apply to all the MD programs and to all multiple schools that are part of the AMC. So through the MCAS application process, it will be $170 for the initial school and to submit your application, and then any additional school that you add from there will be an extra $40. Now, from that application process, then schools will be looking at secondary applications, and oftentimes students aren't aware that the secondary applications is an additional fee, and that they are very unique based on the school-specific essays that they have and questions that they want to see what is your fit with the mission and our program. Along the way, with these primary application fees, what you'll start seeing is that they can range, and some schools may have no secondary application fee, but some can range all the way up to $150 or more. So the value of preparing ahead and being able to collect the list of schools that you're applying to, know how many schools you're planning to apply, and keeping that number manageable can definitely reduce some of the cost. Oftentimes I see students apply a bigger cast a wider net to apply to many more schools, later on not realizing they're going to have many secondary application fees, and therefore don't even complete secondary applications and have spent a lot of money in the primary application process. Also, I'd like to highlight that if you're eligible for the fee assistance programs, many schools will waive their fee, and other schools may also give special consideration based on your fit with their mission, even if you may not have received the fee assistance program. So it's never a bad option to contact each school individually if you have any concerns about being able to cover the cost for secondary application fees, as some may be willing to waive that. So let's talk a little bit more about the different costs that you should be considering. Oftentimes students aren't aware that their suits may no longer fit from high school, and so now they're going into college and moving forward, and needing a new suit might be something that is part of the process of these expenses. In addition, there will be travel expenses, and then schools will require deposits to make sure that you hold seats for any acceptances, and that can also add up. And then also that some schools will be offering a second look opportunity, so that visiting and going back to a school that you've already interviewed might have an additional cost as well. When you think about travel, you want to be thinking about how to be creative with the resources that you have. And so a couple of tips to consider is carpooling and traveling with other students can be a very unique way. Also looking at all your travel options. Unfortunately, not everybody is going to be able to travel via flight sometimes, so sometimes even considering buses and trains that may offer more economical opportunities. While they may take longer to get there, it is a way to save money. The other element about using credit cards is that there could be pros and cons to be thinking about using credit cards. While you are accruing more debt, making sure that you are going to be able to pay that debt off and not rolling over as much debt as you move into your professional program. And so along the way, also being able to collect frequent flyer miles or loyalty programs that provide perks such as free days, stays at hotels, or sometimes even enough miles to have a free flight. So again, accruing these unique perks can be a good way to save money along the way. And I also like to highlight that certain websites, things like Kayak, Priceland, and Travelocity and so forth, may also be a good way to find lower cost travel opportunities, but at the same time that there may be some restrictions where some flights may no longer be able to be canceled, whereas others may allow you to cancel without a fee. So being aware that there is opportunities to save money along the way through these programs is a great way to keep things in mind. We'll move in over to looking at the cost of housing and hotels. As you go on to interviews, you want to be looking at, are there alumni networks that you can tap into to potentially have a place to stay that might be willing to host. There is oftentimes programs that provide a student host program, and taking advantage of the host program is a great way not only to save money, but also to really get a sense of where do students live, what is their community like, and also add another element of the experience of your interview to truly get a feel for how does that program also fit your own particular interests and strengths within a specific school. So again, there is a value in addition to saving money, but also learning about the community of students at these schools. Don't be shy in contacting admissions offices and coordinating interviews. Sometimes because of being in a certain area, you can reach out to programs and see if there is a possibility to coordinate and the timing of interview invites so that you can take advantage of setting up your travel to accommodate multiple interviews within a few days or a few weeks to save money. Oftentimes, the clothing piece is the piece that everybody feels that they have to go out and buy a brand new suit, and we remind that there are unique programs both in the community and sometimes in your own institution. Here at Georgia Tech, we do have a student closet, campus closet, where students are able to check out suits, and there is no cost. And as long as a student returns a suit dry cleaned, it's a service that is provided to all students. So look to see if your institution has those resources. If not, there could be something like Dress for Success in your community that could be a good resource. I also remind students that taking advantage of Goodwill and Salvation Army can be a very unique way to spruce up your outfits and have multiple outfits. But at the same time, you do want to keep in mind, that styles do change, and sometimes these locations may have a little bit older fashion. So again, having that awareness is a good opportunity to look at potential ways to save money as you look at purchasing new clothes. Now we're going to move into just some general other tips to think about as you begin looking at not just the cost of interviewing, but in the future in your attendance and matriculating in a specific school, is looking at what are going to be the resources that you'll have there. So as you begin to plan your finances for not just matriculating and attending medical school, but also the things that you'll need day to day. For some individuals, they might actually have family, and so does the school provide other things like daycare or spousal job placement, or even family housing, where it could potentially be lower cost than renting an apartment, especially in the larger cities. So looking at what are their future costs and what are the things that you'll need, and begin to evaluate those elements so that as you interview and make your decisions on acceptances, also preparing for the future, what are going to be your future costs, and can you keep things manageable? I like to highlight that there are unique professional organizations of current medical students that do offer scholarships and support and resources. In addition to organizations that might be in your community, think about any affiliations with your church or your parents' professions. They may actually have also resources for you to apply to and therefore have support. Sometimes it's a form of a scholarship or different kinds of grants. I like to highlight the NHMA and AMSA as unique organizations that also provide support and preparation for beyond the interview process, and again may be a great way to connect and build a network for hosts. So all these organizations can be ways to connect with other individuals that expand the opportunities to save money along the way. At this point, I'd like to transition back to Julie to talk a little bit more about the cost of medical schools.
Thank you. I think those are some really great tips and just general ideas. And I think one of the biggest things to keep in mind is that all of this information that we're talking about is so that you can prepare. And preparing early, not only maybe you won't be able to save tons of money, or you won't be able to not use a credit card or not have any kind of debt for your application costs, but the idea is being aware and making early decisions, such as, even, when you get money for your birthday, are you going out and spending all of that, or are you putting it in the savings account that could potentially be used for going to medical school and applying for some of these, using it towards some of the expenses that you're going to incur. So we're going to talk a little bit about how much medical school does cost, and I want to remind everybody we are going to answer questions at the end, and I am going to be available from 11 to 8 today through the virtual fair, so you can always contact me there if you have additional financial aid types of questions. So let's go ahead and talk about how much is it going to cost to go to medical school. The first program has a debt fat card, and you can access this through the URL that's shown here. This is a very concise document that shows many different things, including the cost of attending medical school, as well as the median amount of debt and potential repayment options, all in one place. Now, it might be hard to read, so I want to give you this information so we can talk about it a little bit more in depth. So the cost of medical school does not only include tuition and fees, and tuition and fees are going to be set by the individual school. Generally, private schools tend to be a little bit higher than public, but that isn't to say that it's going to cost more to actually attend that school. And the reason for that is because some private schools may have larger endowments, in which they'll be able to offer more scholarship or grant money to you to attend that school. So don't let the cost of medical school deter you from going forward. That is one of the biggest points that I like to make from this type of presentation, and that is that the cost should not be deterring you in any way because of the fact that there are financing options. So don't let these numbers scare you as we go forward. The cost of attendance is a yearly cost, and it is also set by the school, but it includes a number of things. It's going to include your tuition and fees, but it'll also include books and supplies, room and board, transportation allowance, miscellaneous expenses, any fees that are charged by the school, possibly insurance. So there's a number of things that go into there. The 4-year cost of attendance is pretty much, if you add everything together for all 4 years and you borrowed or paid for the total cost of attendance, that is what that number includes. Now, the important thing to keep in mind is the cost of attendance is set by the school, and it's pretty much giving you an idea of what all of the potential fees or expenses could be. But one of the things that I mentioned that's in there is the room and board. And I think it's important to note that it would be very beneficial for you to talk with the schools to find out what they're allowing for room and board within their cost of attendance. The reason I say that is because the schools generally are going to do a survey and know the area in which you're coming to school and where you're going to be living, and so they know what the cost of living should potentially be for a student. I see this all the time when I go to talk to first-year students, and I ask them, how much are you paying for rent? Prior to that question, I've already talked to the financial aid administrator to find out what they are expecting the students to pay in rent. And it's amazing to me when I see somebody that's paying $1,600 a month for an apartment when the school thinks they should be able to stay in an apartment for $1,000. That's another $600 that is going out of your pocket that you could possibly be borrowing through a loan to pay for that you might not have to. Maybe you want to live in that same apartment, but get a roommate because there you've cut down on your costs. So just something to think about and to talk with the school about so that you can get a better idea of where these costs are coming from. So how do you apply for financial aid for medical school? Well, it's going to be very similar to how you apply as an undergraduate. So the very first thing that I always recommend is that you check the medical school's financial aid website. The reason for that is you are going to find out what their deadlines are. You're going to find out what kind of scholarships and grants and other institutional aid that they may be able to offer, and you'll be able to be more prepared about what will be expected at that school. From there, you're then going to complete the FAFSA form. The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid, and it's required in order to get federal loans. Most students are going to borrow loans to go to medical school. So if you're thinking that you're going to be borrowing, chances are you'll want to complete the free application for federal student aid. One thing to point out, because this question comes through a lot, is do I need my parents' information on my FAFSA because I did as an undergraduate? Well, per federal regulations, graduate and professional students are independent for federal student loans. However, there are some schools that are going to require parental information, and the reason for that is they are determining whether or not they can give out institutional or campus-based aid, and many times it's based upon need. So they will look at a family's resources, not to say that you're getting support from your family all the time, but it's just one aspect that some schools may look at. If you find that your situation is different than what is being reported, or you have unique circumstances, then I would recommend talking to the financial aid officer to let them know what your situation is. Again, after you complete the FAFSA form, all of your information is going to be submitted to the schools that are on the FAFSA, and then you are going to receive an eligibility letter letting you know what you qualify for in aid to attend that school. Then you'll need to submit necessary applications such as a master promissory note to actually get your loan. You actually may have to complete a secondary application even for the financial aid office, so keep that in mind. Many times you're going to be filling out scholarship applications, so there's a number of applications after filling out the FAFSA. And again, looking for scholarships using our search tool as well as others to find free scholarships. You don't ever, in my opinion, ever want to have to pay to find free money. That is one thing that should raise your red flag, and because that is not something you should need to do in order to get free money. This is the form for filling out your FAFSA. So if you're not familiar with that, you can go to studentaid.gov. They changed their website recently. So if you have that bookmarked, you might want to change that as well. And then the next thing we'll talk about is now once you've actually filled out the FAFSA form and that's gotten sent to the school and you actually get your eligibility letter from the school showing you what kind of financial aid is available, what does it all mean? Well, what you're going to actually see on that letter could be a number of things. And it could vary depending upon the schools, whether they're public and private, and whether or not you met deadlines that they had. But the things that you're going to see likely will be grants and scholarships, which are free money, and they're usually awarded based upon need or merit. And then you'll also see potentially loans. The loans that are going to be on there are likely going to be federal and or institutional loans if the schools have them to offer. Private loans are another type of loan which will not be on your eligibility letter from the school. We're going to talk a little bit in depth about each of these different types of loan products and what they mean for you. So if you're an undergraduate student and you're receiving federal student aid, you can actually be receiving this type of loan, this direct unsubsidized loan now. You could also be receiving another type of loan called a direct subsidized loan. The difference between the two is how the interest is handled. If you qualify for subsidized loans as an undergraduate student, that simply means that the government is paying the interest on that loan for you while you're in school and during periods of deferment. As a graduate or professional student, you are not going to be eligible for federal subsidized loans. It was a new rule put out in 2010 that said graduate and professional students can only get unsubsidized loans. So that just means that you are going to be responsible for the interest that accrues on this loan while you're in medical school, during your 6-month grace period where you're not required to make any payments, during residency, and then until the loan is paid in full, because interest will continue to accrue until it is paid in full. The nice thing about the unsubsidized loan is that there is no credit check for this loan. It's fairly easy to get. You fill out the FAFSA form. The school tells you your amount that you're eligible for. You fill out the master promissory note, and you complete entrance counseling in order to get the loan. You can actually borrow up to the cost of attendance with an unsubsidized loan, as long as you haven't met aggregate limits. The amount that you will borrow, it will be determined by the school, and if it is not enough to cover all of your finances or all of your expenses, there is another loan program which we're going to go over in just 1 second. With the unsubsidized loan, you don't have to pay on this loan while you're in medical school, and you don't have to pay for 6 months after graduation. After that, you'll either need to make a decision that you want to start paying on the loan while you're in residency, or you'll want to choose what's called a mandatory residency forbearance, which is simply a way to postpone payments during residency. As you can see, the interest rate is indicated there for the 2019-2020 year. This interest rate is set every July 1st, and it stays in place for that particular loan that's dispersed that year. So anybody that gets a loan for the 2019-20 year, that interest rate will be 6.08% until the loan is paid off, or until somebody chooses to refinance, which is taking your federal loans and putting them into a new loan called a private loan with a different lender. There is also an origination fee for the federal loans. It's 1.06% for this unsubsidized loan. What that means to you is if you apply for, let's just say, round number, $5,000, 1.06% of that $5,000 is going to be deducted before the money is sent to the school. So just being aware that that is a fee that's charged is important. If the direct unsubsidized loan is not enough to cover all of your costs, then you could look into what's called the Direct Plus loan. This is also a federal loan, and it's often used to cover what's not covered by the unsubsidized loan. A credit check is required for this loan. You don't have to have stellar credit history, but you can't have negative or adverse credit. So it's really important that if you're thinking that you're going to need to borrow additional monies, that you start to make sure that your credit is in order right now. If it is not, we do have resources to help you with that on the FIRST website, and I encourage you to take a look at those. If you decide to go with the Plus loan, you'll also need to fill out the master promissory note for this loan and complete entrance counseling. You don't have to pay on this loan while you're in medical school, and you have the option to postpone payment through a forbearance with this loan as well during residency. The interest rate is 1% higher than it is on a direct unsubsidized loan, but the big difference with the PLUS loan, in addition to being a credit check being required, is that there is a higher origination fee. So more money is deducted before the funds actually reach the school, can be applied to your account, and then refunded to you. Just so you know, with the federal loans, you can have up to 30 years to repay the loans, depending upon which repayment plan you choose, whether you choose traditional or you choose an income-driven type of repayment plan, or you consolidate. The other types of loans that you may see on your eligibility letter include institutional loans. These are offered not by every school, but by some schools. Some schools have more funds to offer than others. The nice thing with institutional loans is that they're generally going to have better interest rates and or repayment terms than some other loan types that are out there, including federal loans. Not always, but sometimes. So, for instance, sometimes an institutional loan will say that we're going to pay the interest on the loan for you while you're in medical school, and we'll continue to pay the interest while you're in residency. Or they may say, you don't have to make any payments on this loan until after residency is over. There's a number of things that go into how the schools set up their loans, and so knowing what their terms and conditions are very important. Finding out if that loan is offered each year can also be very important for you to know ahead of time for preparing and planning. The next type of loan that some students will look to is what's called a private loan. Private loans are not issued through the federal government. They are going to be issued through a financial institution. So I am not saying that private loans are bad, but what I am going to say is that it's very important for you to understand how they work. You need to pay attention to interest rates. You need to pay attention to what your repayment term is, what your responsibilities and rights are, because sometimes private loans may not offer as much flexibility as the federal loans do, and they may not have as many borrower benefits, such as deferments and forbearance, and possibly forgiveness. So make sure you understand how they work before you sign on the dotted line if you do choose to go with a private loan. So what else do you need to know about your loans? Well, besides that you have to pay them back, and you don't necessarily have to pay them back while you're in residency, but you're going to have to pay them back at some point if you borrow. So what do you need to know? You need to know about this concept of interest that I talked to you about. I told you interest was accruing on your loans. But what you need to know is how it works. And the big thing is that if you borrow money every single year for medical school, that $200,000 is the median amount of debt for the class of 2019. So if you were one of the students that graduated with $200,000, that means after 4 years of medical school, you would have accrued about $25,560, if we round up, in interest. Okay, that's money that starts to accrue once the money is dispersed to you, once the loan is dispersed to you. You don't have to pay on it while you're in school, but you can choose to if you want to. But if you don't pay anything, that $25,558 would set off to the side from the principal that you borrow originally. Now, I also said that you will have a 6-month grace period in which you won't have to make any payments once you graduate. Well, during that 6 months, interest continues to accrue. So for this particular example, that means about another $6,100 is going to accrue in interest. And then what happens is that after that 6-month grace period is over, a process called capitalization is going to occur. And what does that mean? Well, it means they're going to take the principal of $200,000. They're going to take the interest that accrued during medical school, the interest that accrued during your grace period, and they're going to add it all together. And this is your new principal, $231,679, going into residency. And that is the amount that you will pay starting in residency, but that $231,600 is now going to accrue interest going forward. So being aware of that is very important, because if it is possible at any certain time during medical school that you can pay on some of that accrued interest, I would encourage you to do that. Also, I get the question many times when I'm talking to fourth-year students. They say to me, I have a parent or a grandparent that wants to help me out, and they can give me a chunk of money. How should I apply that to my loan? Well, if you apply it towards the interest that's accrued on your loan before capitalization occurs, that's going to be less money overall that you'll have to pay when you go into loan repayment. So keep those kinds of things in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is that there will be an end in sight, okay? It may not feel like it when you're borrowing and when you're signing on the dotted line and you're looking at your loan portfolio increasing, but you are going to be able to pay this money back. The question also I get asked is, how long is it going to take me? Well, that's up to you, because you're not required to make more than a minimum monthly payment once you've determined which repayment plan you want to go into, but you can always pay your loans back early. You can always pay extra on your loans, and all of that will have an impact on how long it's actually going to take you to repay your student loans. So let's take a look so I can give you an actual example of someone that borrowed $200,000 and is going into a residency. And that would be a residency for this year, because $58,000 was the median amount approximately of what first-year residents earned this year. This particular resident is anticipating making $190,000 post-residency. So what does that mean for repayment? What does that look like? Now, before I show you this next slide, what I really want you to remember is that even though these numbers may look intimidating and they may seem like a long ways out, you are going to be able to repay back what you borrow. You are going to have the means to do that. You're going to be able to do this. So don't let the numbers freak you out, okay? So if we look at a sample repayment example, the first thing I want to show you is that as a resident, your net income each month, based upon being a New York resident and using that paycheckcity.com website, we figure that you're going to have about $3,500 a month to live off of, okay? Post-residency, when you're making $190,000 a year, you're probably going to have about $10,000 a month to live off of, okay? So keep those figures in mind. Chances are you're not living off of $3,500 a month now as a student, if I'm guessing correctly. So, putting everything into perspective can be very helpful when you're thinking about repayment. So I'm not going to go over all of the repayment options that are out there, because there are a lot more that are shown here. But what I want to do is show you what it looks like if you chose to do forbearance. And remember, forbearance is putting your loans into basically a postponed status, meaning you don't have to start paying on it during your residency. So if somebody did that and then decided that they wanted to pay their loans off through what's called the standard repayment term, which is a 10-year plan, that just means they wouldn't make any payments in residency. Then they'd pay on the standard plan for 10 years at $3,100 a month. At the end of 10 years, if they only paid that minimum monthly payment, they would have paid a total of $367,000. Now remember, they borrowed $200,000 to go to medical school. So yes, that is a lot of interest that has accumulated on that loan over 10 years. So could this person potentially pay more than $3,100 a month when they're earning $10,000 a month? Possibly. Depends upon how you manage your money and how much you want to get rid of that debt. The other two options that are shown here are pay and repay. These are called income-driven repayment plans, and they simply just mean that your monthly payment is going to be based upon what income you actually have coming in. So during residency, when your salary is lower, in my example, $58,000, your payment's going to be around $320 to $380. Again, you have to sit back and say, can I afford that? And that comes back to budgeting and what kinds of expenses you have. But if you have $3,500 a month to live off of, can you make that payment? The terms here and total years to repay are going to be a little bit different. For repay, the end of the term is 25 years. For pay, the end of the term is 20 years. So for pay, the person did reach the end of the repayment term after they made payments for essentially 17 years after residency. So during that 17 years, they'd pay $1,500 to $2,300 a month, thinking that they would get an increase in salary every year, which is why that amount changes. This person would then pay a total of $394,000, and because they reached the end of their repayment term for pay, they actually had a balance remaining, and the income-driven plan, as it stands today, says that if you pay for 20 years and you still have a balance remaining, then that balance can be forgiven, and that's what's showing here with that $79,000. Now, if you are this person, you are going to have to pay taxes on the amount that is forgiven, so that's something to keep in mind as well. With repay, just so you know, they never reach the end of the term, which is 25 years, so there's actually nothing left to be forgiven because they pay off all of their entire balance. But they essentially are going to pay on the loan longer because they pay less in the beginning, and therefore, they are going to pay for 2 years longer, so of course they end up paying more because the same principle holds for a lot of different things, and the longer it takes you to pay something off, the more you're going to pay in total repayment. So again, this is not a full overview of repayment by any means, but it's just to give you an example, and in my opinion, I'm hopeful that it shows you that, yes, I'm going to be able to do this. Maybe I won't be able to pay as much as I want to during residency, but once I become a physician post-residency, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be able to make those payments and get my loans paid off. Now, what if you do want to lower some of the amount of borrowing? Are there ways to do that? Well, there are, and there are also programs that can help you repay your student loans. So if you're interested in research, or if you're interested in working in underserved communities, and you're willing to provide an assistance, then you may be able to qualify for one of the programs under either National Institutes of Health or perhaps Indian Health Services, National Health Service Corps, or additional military programs if you're interested in the military, or even take a look at that URL that's there, aamc.org/repayassist. That's a database that we put together of not only scholarship programs, but loan repayment programs, and also loan assistance programs. So I encourage you to check out all of those resources because they can certainly help. Another program, because it's in the news a lot, you may have heard about it. It's called the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. It's a federal program that also helps with loan repayment, and it also offers loan forgiveness. So what it says is that if you're paying in an income-driven repayment plan and you're working for a nonprofit employer, at the end of 120 payments, while working for a qualifying employer, while having eligible loans, if you have a balance remaining, it can be forgiven and you don't have to pay tax on it. So that's a really great program, and it's very popular and important that you keep your eyes and ears open about the future of the program to see if it may be an option for you when you get to that point. So we talked about a lot in this last, 45 minutes, and I want to give you a couple of resources where you can go if you do have questions. And those are either the first mailbox, where you can send us an email here at the AAMC regarding financial aid. We can't offer specific assistance, but we can provide you general information on where to go and different types of things to look into. You can also, if you need an advisor and if you need assistance in that manner, you can go to the NAHP website and use their Find an Advisor tool, which can help you find somebody to assist you with the types of things that a pre-health advisor will go over with undergraduate students to assist in getting into medical school or other health professions. At this point in time, I'm going to ask Nishika if any questions have come in, and I know that there have been questions coming in, so I think we're going to just have a dialogue now. She will let us know who has questions, but before we transition to that, I want you to know that if your questions don't get answered, it's because simply we run out of time. So come over to the virtual fair side, get out of the auditorium, and come over and ask us the questions. If we have a NAHP booth, you can ask an advisor a question there, or you can ask me at the first section within the AAMC booth any type of financial aid question. So with that said, Nishika, what's our first question?
Thanks, Julie. We actually have a ton of questions today, so there's a plethora of things to draw from. I saw a couple questions related to FAFSA, and I thought it might be helpful to consolidate those, and I'll direct those to both of our presenters, so feel free to weigh in. We have one question that says, when should I complete the FAFSA? Before you answer, though, there's a related question that says, if I am on the wait list for a school, when should I complete the FAFSA? Should I wait until after my acceptance? What if the acceptance is after the deadline? So I think you can address both of those at one time.
Sure. It always goes back to the school and following the school's policy. So again, looking at the school's financial aid website, make sure that you're meeting their deadlines. But if you're not sure if you're going to that school or you're going to be accepted at that school, you can put schools on the FAFSA form. All of the schools that are listed on the form will receive your information and then can provide you an eligibility letter. If for some reason you don't include a school and then need your information released to them, you can always go back into your FAFSA and add a school.
Thanks. Francisco, did you want to add anything to that?
I would definitely encourage students that when the FAFSA application is available for you to fill out is to submit it right away, because what it means is that you're providing your financial background and your parents' information and getting that information processed so that when you do receive an acceptance, that information is ready to go, and therefore a medical school is able to put together your financial aid package a lot quicker versus waiting to submit the FAFSA and then get that information later. So at the beginning of the application cycle, begin collecting that information, and then typically around October is when you can begin filling out the FAFSA. And so having that information already submitted early can have that information ready to go so that schools can put together those packages faster.
Great, thank you. There's another question that we've received in probably 14 different ways since we've been on this webinar today. And that question is, what if I'm an independent or non-traditional student? Do I still need to list my parents' income on my fee assistance application and on my FAFSA?
And the answer to that is yes. You could be 60 years old and deciding to go to medical school, and if your parents are still living, your parents' information would be needed for the fee assistance application. So yes, you are going to be required to provide that information. If you have unique circumstances, that is when you would contact the fee assistance program staff, which is what I was referring to when I said take a look at the Contact Us on the fee assistance webpage.
Thanks. Here's another question. Francisco, I'm going to direct this one to you. And before you respond, I've thought about a couple of examples that might be helpful for the students to hear. So this question is, are there scholarships other than the fee assistance program that help with the application costs for medical school? And just off the top of my head, I thought of two examples when I saw this question come in. One is that there is a scholarship for undergraduate pre-med students at Oakwood University that was started by one of their medical school alumni, and that person started that scholarship for students who are applying to medical school because of their own personal experience with the challenges of application costs. So you might want to speak with your career services office or your pre-health advisor to find out if there are any institutional resources that can assist you with your application process. The other thing I thought about was these creative ways to tap into undergraduate student awards. So if there's an award for writing papers or awards for giving presentations over the summer while you're in your undergraduate classes, then you can direct those awards to your application costs. So think about creative ways to tap into existing resources to help undergird your application costs. So Francisco, would you add anything to that?
While it's harder to find scholarships or money that is for the application process, students can be very proactive about working with their families, and so thinking ahead even a few years in advance, saying instead of receiving gifts during Christmas or during any of the holidays or birthdays, that money can actually be saved so that down the road when the application process comes up, the student has actually been able to save money along the way. So requesting for gift cards and financial gifts is a really good way to start saving money up front. As far as other actual scholarships for the application process, as we discussed earlier, if it's not through the fee assistance program, it is definitely reaching out to the medical schools and seeing if they have any other support, or again, if you fit with their mission, they may be willing to waive some of the fees during the secondary application process, and that could be another way to save money.
I kind of chuckled internally when you were addressing that, and I thought about one of the things we used to do in our family was if we had a family member that was applying for college at the time of the holidays, we would encourage them to ask each family member to sponsor one application. So if I'm applying to X medical school, then that's Auntie's responsibility, and she'll take care of all the costs for that particular application. So you can always be creative in how you tap into your resources.
Most definitely.
There's another question. Yeah, there's another question that we received in a couple of different ways, and that one pertains to international applicants. Are there specific resources that are available to international students? And I guess a sub-question to that one that we've seen is, are there any differences between what's available for international students versus what's available for permanent residents?
I'll speak to that from a financial aid perspective. In order to be eligible for U.S. federal loan monies, that direct unsubsidized and direct plus loans, you are going to need to be a U.S. citizen and eligible citizen, or meet eligibility requirements for U.S. financial aid. That being said, if you're a U.S. student and you're looking at going to a school that is not in the U.S., some non-U.S. schools do accept federal financial aid funding. So that's important to know if the school does accept that kind of funding. As far as international students who want to attend a U.S. school and they don't have the funds, how are you going to pay for that? Well, there's a number of ways. Sometimes it's a matter of a private loan, but then you're likely going to need a cosigner, and many times they're going to be a U.S. cosigner. You may need to provide verification that you already have the funds in your bank account, or your parents have that money available, that you will be able to fund your education. And then there are going to be some medical schools that may have specific funding set aside for international students. So again, knowing what is available at the school is going to be very important.
I also would like to add that it's depending on the country that the student is from, it's a good idea to go back and see if there is any government support, because there may be opportunities to apply for something to financial support through their home country, and therefore potentially access additional money that way.
That's a very good point, Francisca. Thanks for adding that.
So we had another couple of questions that I'm going to group together that are related to cost of living expenses for medical students. So one question asked, do most medical students work outside of school part-time to support their housing expenses? And a related question is, if a school does not offer health insurance, where do students older than 26 get coverage? Can loan money be used to pay for insurance?
Those are good questions. The first one regarding work, I'm going to say most students do not work. And that is going to also be dependent upon some schools. Some schools may have requirements that say that you cannot work just because the workload's too difficult, or the requirements that are in place. The other question regarding living expenses as far as, and health insurance and that type of thing, I would say you're going to need to talk with the school because the financial aid office at the school is going to be able to assist you a little bit more. Maybe there's a state program, maybe there are other programs that they are aware of that students have used if they didn't qualify for insurance because of their age with their parents and the school didn't provide it. but I do know that many schools do have health insurance programs for students. Francisco, do you have anything to add to that?
I would just agree that working through that individual school, asking those very specific questions. I remind students that the financial aid officers at these medical schools are there to be your best friends. It doesn't impact your admissions decision, and so being very transparent with any of your questions does not hurt you in this process. And so, yes, inquiring is health insurance available, and is there any reduced opportunities within their institution is a great question to ask those specific schools.
Thanks. So I think this is the last question that we can do. We will be online for the duration of the fair answering additional questions. So this will be the last one we'll take. When do you apply for the public service loan forgiveness? Can you apply during medical school, or does it have to happen after you graduate?
It would happen after you graduate because you have to actually be employed, and you have to show proof of employment, and you have to be in repayment of your direct loans. So it's an after you're done with school, and you could potentially qualify as a resident, though.
Well, thank you. Thank you both of our presenters, and thank you everyone for joining us for tips and tools for financing your application and career in medicine. As we shared, we will be online in the AAMC booth, and our first representatives will be available to answer questions for the duration of the fair, and we look forward to engaging with you there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.